All right, part three. We made it. We're here. We're really having a fun time. We're going in with our second glazing, and we talked about how we're paying attention to this drying time on our paper really carefully. Um, did you notice how much water I put on in my first glazing? Did you notice that? You'll in part two. You can always go back to part two to check it out. But in part two, you'll see that I did not go incredibly heavy with water and paint, but I went, with an average amount of water and paint, um, but not too much paint. So I left it light. So we went with a light glazing of color here. Um, so the paper didn't get incredibly soaked that it became, buckled to, and it's also a thick paper. I must say that. If you use a thicker paper, a thicker watercolor paper, you'll have less buckling. So this is a really heavy watercolor paper I'm using. It's Arch's rough grain paper, and it's 300 gram, and it's very thick. I'm going to get the exact spec on this so I can. So this is actually 640 gram, 300 pound Arches. Um, it's the green block paper. So it's the blocks that come glued around the sides. All four sides are glued together, and then you just peel off each piece of paper as you work through your block of watercolor paper. And it's the green, dark green cover. So it's fine grain, cold pressed, 640 gram, 300 pound. So this is that's if you can get that paper when you do like your finished paintings or cards, or if you're just doing comps and you want to try using some of the better paper occasionally, or if if it's in your budget you can do it all the time, use the best paper you can. But that hardly buckles at all, which gives you a lot of um, advantages. So the paper won't buckle on you all that much, and that means you can leave your paper a little bit damp, because it's better if you do this while it's a touch damp. I mean, dry to the touch, but there's still some moisture in this paper, which is better for blending the paints into the paper. Gives a better overall finish. Okay, so we're going to start to get some paint on here. So I'm using a different color today. I'm using the sepia tone. So I'm using some sepia tone here, which is like an ivory but black pretty much. And then I'm going to use some raw sienna mixed in with that. And that should give us a good building color here. So I'll go in, and it looks somewhat dark, but it always lightens up. We always remember that watercolor dries usually, it lightens up about half the amount once it's dry. So if you put it on really dark, it's going to lighten up about half of the way it looks when you're putting it on. So try to keep that in mind when you're painting, that you always have to paint darker than you think it's going to need to be to get that desired tonal value you're looking for. So I'm doing these distant buildings across the street here. Some shadowing under the cars here. Maybe I'll put in some French ultramarine blue too under here a little bit. So we're starting to get into some of the road here. But I'm going to leave that white paper there. I'll do some of this permanent building here that we saw in the photograph Just some details there. Again, this is a thumbnail comp. Then we're going to go into some cadmium red for our canopy. Maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson. Then I'm going to use some more of that sepia tone and then darken up this this section of the and a little bit of blue. So I'm going to try to start mixing my colors a little bit more. This awning over here, I don't want it to be as and then I can always go back in and so here I'm going to go underneath. There's some really good darks underneath this awning here. So I'm not going to, I'm just going to make some suggestive type brush strokes in here, and I'm not going to get too detailed or too worried about it. And then I'm going to go in with some cerulean blue and get some of the medium colors in there, some medium tones, cooler. And that's a person there, so we're going to leave that like that. So we blocked out for the figure in there. I'm using my photograph quite a bit right now across from me, so I'd like to take the photograph down and kind of show you. But you guys probably can take a picture on your video, on your laptop or your TV of the photograph when I had it on before, and then you can use that if you wanted to, or you can look it up on Google. It's pretty simple. You know, online you can probably look up the photograph pretty easily. I just typed in Paris street scene, I think. So that's okay. And then now we're gonna start working again with the sepia tone, and then I'm mixing a little bit of French ultramarine blue in there, just to kind of mix up the tones a little bit. And I think I'm gonna start doing maybe there's a couple. There's maybe a street light there. I could always wait till last minute to do that. Now I'm going to do the lines in the road here. And again, I'm not going too fussy. Just getting them down onto the roadway there. And same over here. And the lines sort of fan out. You can see that angle sort of. So as they get closer here, they're more following the angle of the sidewalk, and then they get a little more flared out this way, the lines. So as lines go across your picture, they're going to kind of turn like in a fan type fashion, your lines. And so we have that. That's looking good. And then again, cerulean blue and so that's cerulean blue and sepia tone. And again, I'm trying to get the feel for this tree here. I still have some figure work to do, and as things go in the distance, they get lighter. So then here we can find our line needlepoint brush, and that we can get some fine lines of twigs and trees in the distance here. And now this figure here is going to sort of take up some of that viewing space here in the painting where the sidewalk is. And some yellow ochre, and you're seeing here I'm letting my paints mingle and mix here. So that's this can be another row of buildings in the background, and then we can fill in a few more details with those if we want once that dries a little bit. Sometimes you can get a few lines, scratch out a few lines here and there just for variety. Okay, and then we'll do some more sepia tone. Okay, now that's a case where that's starting to, again, this is just we're just doing a nice thumbnail here to get some ideas, so I'm not going to go crazy if certain things get a little out of control with bleeding and things like that. I'm not going to get too worried about it, but we're starting to get pretty much a good feel for this. I'm just going to put down some cadmium red on the ground area from the awning. Just an indication of some color there. And we'll do a jacket. Maybe a nice blue jacket, and we'll tone that down a little bit. Okay, we're looking good here. We're making our way through this painting, and we're getting a good feel here. So let's come back in the next part and we'll finish up.